we're going to be covering the myth between EDS and stretching. So the myth is stretching is really bad for EDS. That is not the case. In fact, most people with EDS have tightness in a lot of other areas that cause issues related to subluxations, meaning when the joint's kind of coming in and out of that socket. So what I want to cover today is what's safe with stretching, what's not safe with stretching, just to give you a better idea on when you're doing exercises, what do I not need to do to make sure I maintain mobility without causing any sort of subluxation and dislocation. So the first thing to think about, it's the easiest to look at, is the arm, right? When we look at the arm, if I'm going sideways here, we know that arm ideally should be about 180 degrees, 170 give or take depending on tightness. So this is about the extent. Now when we think about stretching, especially with the shoulders, we know that shoulders and hips are common areas for subluxations, especially the shoulders. So how do we, for an example, I'll use yoga as an example. How am I able to use yoga without causing any issues to my shoulders because it ends up causing more pain? Now, the good thing about yoga is you have to sustain positions that require what we call a co-contraction. So muscles contracting at the same time in order to keep that joint in the socket, whether it's the hip or the shoulder. The issue is when we go past that range of motion, as that's happening, we're more susceptible for injury because we're going past what our normal motion should be, which causes excess strain to the capsule, to the ligaments, to the muscles, etc. So, taking the shoulder as an example, if I know that this is my max range of motion that I want to do to maintain healthy mobility in the shoulder without it going further back, what are positions that may be more likely to cause an issue in the shoulder if I go past it? So using yoga as an example again, if I'm in a child's pose, I want to make sure that the bicep is not really passing behind the ear. Anything behind the ear is past 180 degrees. So if you're wanting to do something like this safely, then if you're in this position, this is actually about the extent that I can do before I start to dip a bit below this that can cause extra strain on that shoulder. Let's say we're referencing downward dog. So if I'm in this position here, notice that my bicep is actually in front of my ear, not behind it. So this would be a safer position as I'm doing, whether it's stretching out the calves or I'm holding this position in downward dog. There's a lot of things that are positive in this position because one, in this kind of propped up all fours plank position, I'm having to get that co-contraction in the shoulder to make sure that I'm staying stable. Now, with that keeps the shoulder in the socket, keeps the hips in the socket, those kind of things, depending on what positions that you're in. So when we're talking about is stretching safe, yes, it is, but we have to know how far is too far, and that might require a little bit more research on your end to figure out what's normal range of motion prior to doing some exercises. Another example I'll use is the hip. Okay, a lot of times people can bring their leg over their head, and with hypermobility or EDS, that's not something that's going to be beneficial to you because you're going past that motion. So the ligaments are supposed to be keeping that joint, and muscles, tendons, ligaments are supposed to be keeping that from going past that motion to protect the joint. When you're going past it, there's an issue. So when we think about whether it's shoulder, whether it's the hip, even the fingers, we're not trying to bring our fingers past 90 degrees back. It should only be about 40 degrees or so in this position. So if we're doing things that require my fingertips to be in 90 degrees, we know that's stretching too much. I use the appendages like the ankles and legs and shoulders just because those are the places on folks with hypermobility or EDS that tend to get more injured. Now, the area that is least targeted for those who need stretching with hypermobility or EDS is your mid-thoracic spine. So if I were to turn this way, it's basically below my shoulder blade, above my low back area. And when this, I guess you'll have people kind of feel like this little kyphotic or that rounded back position. That's the section that we actually need more mobility because in this position, if I can't get higher up, that's affected by my back. If I'm in a better posture, it's less strain on my shoulder. So the exercise I'm going to do today is actually more for mid-thoracic stretching versus the other stretches. I just wanted to give a little bit more education so you feel a bit more comfortable when going into positions and understanding you can't perform stretches without going past your normal range of motion. So from a thoracic standpoint, it's a bit trickier. So I like to do an open book, just on the ground. There's variations in standing or in half kneeling, those kind of things. But the idea is trying to get more rotation and extension. So if I'm in this position and I had my head supported, what I want to do is as I breathe in, I'm going to bring this back, keeping the knees flat here. You notice you also get some lumbar rotation. So it's not purely thoracic, but it's just something to start off as a beginner before you get into more advanced work for the thoracic. So if I'm here, my shoulder ideally should be flat. So if I switch to the other way so you can see where I'm going with this, if my hand's staying here, my shoulder should hit. Notice this side's a bit tighter. My shoulder doesn't lie flat on the floor compared to the other side. I'm just going to work my way through this, breathing in. Once I get as far as I can without lifting up my knees, I'll breathe out. Again, showing you from the other side. Breathing in. This one I have way more mobility. My shoulder goes flat. I'm not trying to lift this up too much, so ideally I want this more on the ground. Blow it out. And as you get better, you're going to see that you can go further and further and further. But it's a great way, one, not to exceed your shoulder motion, because if I'm sitting in this position, the max that I'm going is to the floor, so it's only here. If I were to go further back, that's past my normal range of motion. That's going to put extra strain on the shoulder, especially if it has a history of dislocations or subluxations. So in a nutshell, a lot of information. I just wanted to give you a starter video on understanding that it is okay to stretch. It's very important to stretch to make sure you have normal range of motion so it doesn't cause any other orthopedic issues, but also understanding what's too far and what other exercises or movements that you can do to help stabilize those joints in addition to combining it with stretching.